There was a time in the 1990s when television executives lived in constant fear, not of ratings or rivals, but of imagination. Every time a sci-fi pitch landed on their desks, they'd hold their breath, because the 90 seconds brought a wave of shows so bold, so strange, that they nearly broke television's rules entirely. These weren't safe, formulaic space adventures. They were risky experiments, filled with conspiracy, cosmic dread, and worlds that mirrored our own fears. Some of them terrified censors, others confused advertisers, and a few were quietly buried only to become cult legends decades later. From alien invasions that hit too close to home to storylines that dared to question reality itself, these 10 sci-fi shows didn't just push boundaries, they shattered them. And in doing so, they forced the networks to change TV forever. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to Vintiverse, where forgotten classics and fearless ideas come alive again. Number 10. Space Above and Beyond, 1995. When Space Above and Beyond first hit television screens in 1995, executives at Fox had no idea what they were unleashing. They expected another flashy space adventure, a show filled with lasers, hero pilots, and alien shootouts. What they got instead was something darker, more human, and far too honest for comfort. Created by the X-Files masterminds Glenn Morgan and James Wong, Space Above and Beyond dropped viewers into future, where humanity's colonies have been attacked by a mysterious alien species called the Chigs. The response? A desperate interstellar war fought not by superhumans, but by scared, flawed soldiers barely old enough to understand what they were dying for. Each episode followed the 58th Squadron, a group of young Marines forced into a cosmic nightmare that looked disturbingly familiar. The show didn't glorify war, it questioned it. Viewers saw pilots haunted by PTSD, artificial humans struggling to prove their worth, and commanders making impossible moral choices. There were no invincible heroes, only survivors trying to hold on to their humanity. That brutal realism terrified network executives. They wanted escapism, not a space mirror reflecting the trauma of real-world wars. The tone was too bleak, the moral questions too heavy, and the visual style too raw. Advertisers started pulling away, fearing audiences would turn off instead of tuning in. But for sci-fi fans, it was something they'd never seen before. A war story that treated its characters like human beings, not action figures. The show was canceled after just one season. Too expensive, too daring, too honest. But years later, when Battlestar Galactica and The Expanse gained acclaim for their gritty, emotional storytelling, creators openly credited Space Above and Beyond as the trailblazer. It was the show that scared executives because it told the truth. That sometimes, the monsters aren't the aliens, they're us. Number 9. TekWar, 1994. Before the age of smartphones, social media, or virtual reality, there was TekWar, a series that dared to ask one question decades ahead of its time. What happens when technology becomes more addictive than life itself? In 1994, TV audiences were just getting comfortable with the internet. Computers were still bulky. The idea of cyberspace was abstract, and most executives didn't understand half of what they were greenlighting. Then came TekWar, based on novels by Star Trek icon William Shatner, and it made them sweat. The show followed Jake Cardigan, a former cop frozen for crimes he didn't commit, suddenly released into a futuristic world ruled by a digital drug called Tek. Tek wasn't a pill or powder. It was a neural simulation that hijacked your brain, letting you live in your perfect fantasy. You could be rich, powerful, loved, and everything real life denied you. But once you plugged in, reality began to rot. The executives panicked. The show wasn't just about virtual reality. It was about addiction, corporate control, and moral decay. TekWar portrayed a future where people would rather live inside illusions than face truth. In the mid-90 seconds, that idea was uncomfortably close to the growing obsession with screens, video games, and digital entertainment. Each episode took the viewer deeper into a neon-lit underworld of hackers, rogue AIs, and black market tech dealers. There were corrupt politicians using the technology to control minds, and entire cities teetering on the edge of collapse. It wasn't glossy sci-fi, It was dirty, cynical, and uncomfortably prophetic. Executives wanted to sell it as action, but TekWar was really a warning. It showed a future of humans willingly surrendering to pleasure while corporations got rich selling the illusion. Today, it feels eerily familiar, as if Shatner had glimpsed our modern digital addiction long before anyone else dared talk about it. The show ran for just 2 seasons before networks backed off, calling it too niche and too dark. But what they didn't realize was that TekWar had already predicted their future, one where technology wouldn't just entertain us, it would own us. Number 8, Millennium 1996. When Millennium premiered in 1996, executives at Fox were already nervous, and they had good reason to be. The creator, Chris Carter, had just turned The X-Files into a pop culture phenomenon, but this time he wasn't dealing with aliens or government secrets. Millennium explored something far more terrifying: the darkness inside human nature itself. The show followed Frank Black, a former FBI profiler gifted or cursed with the ability to see into the minds of killers. He joins a mysterious organization known as the Millennium Group, which claims to be preparing for the world's end. But as Frank hunts serial predators and uncovers conspiracies rooted in religion, technology, and prophecy, one thing becomes clear: evil doesn't need monsters. It hides in plain sight. Executives were horrified by what they saw. This wasn't safe primetime television, it was raw, psychological horror dressed as procedural drama. Episodes dealt with paranoia, apocalyptic cults, and the crumbling of morality as the year 2000 approached. The tone was relentlessly bleak, the cinematography drenched in shadow and decay. Carter wasn't giving audiences comfort, he was showing them the spiritual rot of the late 90s. Network censors demanded changes. Advertisers wanted distance. Religious groups protested. Even some crew members reportedly said filming certain episodes felt haunted. Yet fans couldn't look away. Millennium felt too real, echoing the growing societal anxiety that maybe the end wasn't just near, it had already begun. Though it only lasted 3 seasons, Millennium became a blueprint for psychological thrillers like Mindhunter and True Detective. It terrified executives because it revealed a truth they didn't want to admit. Sometimes the scariest stories don't come from outer space. They come from us. Number 7, The Outer Limits, 1995. By the time Showtime decided to resurrect The Outer Limits in 1995, even the network's own executives couldn't predict the storm that was coming. The original 1960s series was already infamous for bending minds, but this 90s reboot went even further. It didn't just explore science fiction, it held a mirror up to humanity and asked, what if we're the real experiment? Each episode was its own standalone nightmare. Cloning, artificial intelligence, body modification, moral corruption, no heroes, no safety net. Viewers never knew whether an episode would end in triumph or tragedy. One week, a scientist would create life. The next, he'd destroy his family. Another episode tackled genetic manipulation so boldly that network lawyers demanded disclaimers before airing. Executives dreaded the phone calls that followed every broadcast. Religious groups accused the show of playing God. Parents' associations complained about its dark philosophical themes. But audiences were captivated. They weren't used to being challenged by television. Every episode forced viewers to think about ethics, humanity, and what progress might cost. What terrified executives most was that The Outer Limits refused to behave. It didn't follow TV rules. There was no recurring star to market, no predictable story arc to comfort advertisers. It was pure, dangerous storytelling, the kind that left viewers questioning reality long after the credits rolled. Even decades later, many of its episodes feel disturbingly prophetic, predicting surveillance culture, AI autonomy, and genetic design. The show may have scared its sponsors, but it gave science fiction back its soul. The Outer Limits didn't just change TV. It reminded the world that great sci-fi should make us uncomfortable. Number 6, Farscape, 1999. By the late 1990s, television executives had grown used to the idea of safe sci-fi, structured plots, neat resolutions, and relatable heroes. Then, Farscape came crashing in like a meteor from another galaxy, and everything they thought they knew about science fiction exploded. Created by Rockne S. O'Bannon and produced by the Jim Henson Company, Farscape was a cosmic fever dream. It told the story of John Crichton, an astronaut flung through a wormhole into a distant universe ruled by living ships, bizarre alien races, and ruthless militaries. But what truly shocked executives wasn't the plot, it was the world itself. The characters were grotesque, beautiful, unpredictable, and alive. Half of them were animatronic creatures built by the legendary Henson Workshop. Networks didn't know what to make of it. Here was a show that mixed adult humor, surreal visuals, and deeply emotional storytelling, all wrapped in wild alien puppetry. It was too strange for mainstream TV, too intelligent for casual audiences, and too daring for cautious advertisers. Sci-Fi Channel executives reportedly loved it but feared it would never find a stable audience. But here is the interesting part. Farscape broke every rule. Characters fell in love across species, reality bent at will, and storylines embraced madness instead of logic. It explored identity, trauma, and loneliness through alien metaphors that felt painfully human. Behind its colorful chaos was something profoundly relatable: the struggle to stay sane in a universe that never stops testing you. Number 5. Stargate SG-1, 1997. At first glance, Stargate SG-1 looked like an easy sell, a spin-off from a successful 1994 film with military heroes and alien adventures. But behind the scenes, network executives were anxious. Turning a blockbuster movie into a long-running TV series was already risky, and basing it on complex mythological concepts, that sounded like a disaster waiting to happen. The series followed a secret US Air Force team that used an ancient alien device called the Stargate to travel to distant planets. But this wasn't just about exploring the stars. SG-1 tackled ideas most network sci-fi dared not touch: religion, power, and humanity's place in the cosmos. The villains weren't monsters. They were false gods who enslaved entire civilizations using faith as a weapon. It was bold, provocative storytelling that made executives squirm. At the time, networks feared alienating religious viewers or confusing mainstream audiences with serialized arcs. They wanted villain of the week. What they got was an evolving mythology, a massive universe filled with moral gray zones, rebellion, and sacrifice. Even its tone scared executives. SG-1 was unapologetically ambitious, blending humor, war drama, and ancient mysticism all at once. Yet that mix became its secret weapon. Fans connected to the camaraderie of the main cast, especially Richard Dean Anderson's weary but charismatic Jack O'Neill. The show's universe felt real, lived in, human, and grounded despite its cosmic scale. What started as a gamble became one of the longest-running sci-fi shows in history. It spawned multiple spin-offs, movies, and a passionate global fandom that still thrives decades later. Number 4. Sliders, 1995. In 1995, Fox executives thought they were greenlighting a harmless sci-fi adventure, a fun, dimension-hopping romp that might pull in younger audiences. What they got instead was one of the most dangerously ambitious shows of the decade, Sliders. It began with a simple but electrifying premise. A brilliant grad student named Quinn Mallory accidentally discovers a portal that allows him and his friends to slide between parallel Earths. But instead of predictable space battles or alien encounters, Sliders delivered something far more unsettling: worlds that looked like our own, just slightly off. One Earth was ruled by a communist America. Another was devastated by plague. One was dominated by corporate control so absolute it made capitalism look like a cult. Every new world forced viewers and network executives to confront uncomfortable what-ifs. The problem? It was too smart for its own good. Writers weren't afraid to tackle political corruption, class inequality, and even media manipulation issues most networks preferred to avoid. Executives feared backlash, and soon the pressure started. Tone it down, they said. Make it safer. By season 3, the network had wrestled control away, forcing the show into Monster of the Week territory. The original creators were pushed out, and the show's tone shifted overnight. But by then, Sliders had already carved its legacy. Fans adored its early seasons, unpredictable, intelligent, and hauntingly reflective of real-world fears. It dared to suggest that the greatest danger wasn't aliens or technology, but humanity itself, given the slightest wrong turn. Number 3. Babylon 1994. Michael Straczynski showed up with an idea so radical it terrified executives. A 5-year story planned from beginning to end. No shortcuts, no filler, just one epic interconnected saga. Babylon 5 was set aboard a massive space station, a neutral ground where humans and aliens tried, and often failed to maintain peace. But beneath the politics and galactic diplomacy, Straczynski was telling a human story about faith, corruption, destiny, and loss. Characters evolved, made irreversible decisions, and sometimes died for them. This wasn't just TV, it was a novel unfolding in real time. Executives panicked. What if viewers miss an episode? They asked. What if ratings drop mid-season? In the 1990s, serialized storytelling was seen as commercial suicide. Networks wanted standalone episodes that could be shuffled in syndication, but Babylon 5 refused to compromise. The risks didn't stop there. The show used early CGI instead of traditional models, a groundbreaking move that saved money but made executives nervous about quality. Critics doubted it would last a season. Instead, it grew into one of the most sophisticated and emotionally layered sci-fi series ever made. It tackled war crimes, fascism, faith, and the collapse of moral authority, subjects that made studios sweat. Yet, it was precisely that ambition that set Babylon 5 apart. Fans followed every thread, every arc, every sacrifice. By the time the final season aired, the industry had changed forever. Without Babylon 5, there would be no Battlestar Galactica, no The Expanse, and no Game of Thrones on TV. Number 2. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, 1993. When Star Trek Deep Space Nine launched in 1993, network executives at Paramount were confident they knew what Star Trek fans wanted. Optimistic exploration, moral certainty, and clean endings. But this wasn't that. Deep Space Nine took the most hopeful franchise in television and locked it on a space station where hope itself was constantly under siege. The premise seemed simple. Commander Benjamin Sisko, played by Avery Brooks, oversees a remote station near a newly discovered wormhole, a gateway to the unexplored Gamma Quadrant. But instead of boldly going anywhere, DS9 looked inward, exploring religion, politics, and the uncomfortable realities of war. It was claustrophobic, morally complex, and unlike anything Trekkies had seen before. Executives panicked early. Star Trek was supposed to be utopian. Bright uniforms, moral victories, and diplomatic resolutions. DS9 gave them moral ambiguity, occupation, and trauma. Episodes tackled terrorism, propaganda, religious extremism, and the ethics of power. Sisko wasn't a flawless captain. He was human, sometimes vengeful, even compromised. By Season 4, when the Dominion War storyline took over, DS9 had fully evolved into a serialized war epic, a move that scared executives who wanted self-contained episodes for syndication. But audiences stayed. They didn't want comfort anymore. They wanted truth. And DS9 delivered it with intelligence and courage. Number 1. The X-Files, 1993. When The X-Files premiered in 1993, it wasn't just a show. It was a cultural event that rewired how television told stories. And for network executives, it was both a goldmine and a nightmare. Chris Carter's concept sounded absurd on paper. An FBI duo investigating government conspiracies, alien abductions, and supernatural horrors. The tone was grim, the pacing slow, the atmosphere soaked in paranoia. Executives feared it would flop. Too weird for mainstream TV, one reportedly said. But Carter knew exactly what he was doing. The X-Files thrived on ambiguity. It didn't give answers. It made audiences question everything. The government, science, even their own beliefs. Each week peeled back another layer of shadow, blurring the line between fact and fiction. What truly terrified executives wasn't the aliens or monsters, it was how the X-Files exposed viewers' distrust in authority, at a time when TV was supposed to comfort, not provoke. Behind the scenes, tension was constant. Fox executives wanted more standalone episodes to attract casual viewers. Carter fought to protect his myth arc, a sprawling conspiracy that spanned years. He won, and television would never be the same again. The show's impact was seismic. It inspired Fringe, Lost, Supernatural, and every serialized mystery that followed. Its moody cinematography, cinematic direction, and psychological depth turned network television into a playground for serious storytelling. For executives, The X-Files was the show they couldn't control, the one that broke every rule and still became a phenomenon. It terrified them because it proved that audiences craved mystery, fear, and complexity. And in the end, The X-Files didn't just change sci-fi, it changed the way the world watched TV. If you grew up with any of these shows or discovered them years later, tell us which one changed the way you see the world. Drop your thoughts below, because your voice is part of this story too. Also, make sure you subscribe to Vintiverse, hit the like button, and share this video with a friend who still believes there's magic in the static.